Last few years, the Bengals have drafted ahead of time, and they're replacements for a lot of the expiring contracts on the roster. There is one glaring exception. Let's talk through that and try to prioritize the Bengals extensions after Joe Burrow this offseason and into the future.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Liscow. He's your host, James Rapien. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network here on Locked On Bengals, and you can subscribe to this show anywhere you get your podcasts or on YouTube. Become part of that first listen club. Make us your first listen every day. We appreciate all of you who do that on your way to work or while you're making breakfast, whatever you're doing. And join that everyday club. Become an everydayer. As we go into the off season, that job gets easier. Not that it's a job if you enjoy what we do. The everyday listening to the Locked On Bengals podcast for at least the next few weeks will be a 3-episode per week obligation on your part, or experience for those of you that don't see it as an obligation, which I hope is all of you. We're in off-season mode, getting there as the Bengals wind down and are getting ready to take some time off. They have one open day for OTAs this week, and we'll have you covered after that day of OTAs. That'll be on Tuesday, so we'll have an episode Tuesday night. We'll also have an episode Thursday night for Friday, so Tuesday for Thursday, and of course this episode Sunday for Monday, Sunday night upload for your enjoyment on Monday. We'll follow the same schedule for minicamp most likely. That's a little bit more up in the air depending on how things go that week, how the minicamp schedule ends up shaking out. But for the foreseeable future, until you hear otherwise from us, unless we have some specials coming up, which we might, and we'll tell you about them when we do, we'll probably be on a 3-episode per week schedule for a little bit here as the Bengals kind of are quieter getting into the peak offseason, the doldrums of the offseason before training camp picks up. And that doesn't mean we don't have a show today, James. Today, we've got this idea. It came from the mailbag last week, and it was a question from Alex Zabonik asking us to kind of prioritize and talk about the likelihood of different guys getting extended. And the Bengals' MO lately has been second contracts. Mm-hmm. We'll pay second contracts. We're not really happy to pay third contracts. Not a whole lot of third contracts, if any, have to really look on this team right now. Is Ted Karras a third contract, or did he get traded to Miami?
I mean, he's technically a third, but he bounced around. Like he signed a 1-year deal and 1-year deal. So technically, but no, this is his first real long-term contract.
He got the 1-year deal. Yeah, he did the prove it deal kind of thing. That's right. So not many third contracts, fair to say.
Yep.
Almost no one you can point to and say the Bengals signed this player at age 29 or age 30 or older in the last 5 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
They've drafted as well, like I said, a lot of the heir apparents at a lot of positions where they have expiring contracts. And as you go through this roster, you can see that at corner. We saw that at safety. You can see that at slot wide receiver potentially if Tyler Boyd isn't back, and he talked about his potential future. What do you think? Are they doing a pretty good job with preparing themselves for those? What do you think about those three spots?
It's an interesting conversation because for years and years now, and during this run, they've had so much success signing guys to that are entering their prime, second-year deals or second contracts. Chidobe Awuzie is as good of an example as any, where that first 4 seasons in Dallas, he deals with some injuries. He isn't the guy that we've seen for the past 2 years, and hopefully we see this season as he comes back from the ACL, but he wasn't a number 1 corner in Dallas, and he was a second-round pick, and I think the Bengals like some of the traits, and they stole him. He quickly became one of the best values in the NFL, and that's just one of the many examples. And so it's like, okay, well, Chidobe Awuzie, let's say he goes out there and plays well this year. Sounds great. Are the Bengals signing him to that third contract? would they, if he had stayed healthy last year, tried to sign him to an extension this offseason? Or is DJ Turner, Cam Taylor-Britt, do we see the writing on the wall with potential replacements? That's where this Bengals team is, because they're going to have to pay Joe Burrow and they're going to have to pay Jamar Chase. T. Higgins, I think they want to pay, and they want to make sure that works too. And so you have to get younger on defense, less expensive. And I look at a lot of these guys, Trey Hendrickson, right? Huge second contract, has paid off, but they just drafted Miles Murphy. Mm-hmm. Tyler Boyd talking about his future, knowing that the writing could be on the wall that he goes elsewhere, knowing that if he was a free agent right now, maybe he would have signed for more. In fact, I think he would have. If he was a free agent this offseason, he might have been the top receiver. I mean, there was no one really out there. You know, it was Jacoby Myers was a guy who got $13 million per year, Juju Smith-Schuster. I certainly think Tyler Boyd could be in that class or close to it. And instead, he's making $8 million this year. I don't know if the Bengals are going to be able to keep a Boyd if they re-sign Higgins. I think that's probably unrealistic. DJ Turner, probably Chidobe Awuzie's replacement, whether you like it or not. The one guy that there is no obvious replacement for, and we mock defensive tackles, even in a weak defensive tackle class, we mock some nose tackles to the Bengals before the draft for this reason. DJ Reader is almost 30 years old. He's about to be 30 in a few months. And no extension, contract year. Will the Bengals sign him to a third deal? I think that's a big question, especially considering the last defensive tackle. And they're different. Geno Atkins, a much different player, I think, than DJ Reader. But the last time they did that, it kind of burned them a bit with one of the best players in franchise history, even though Geno was pretty darn good in 2019 before he got hurt in 2020.
Small correction. Unless everything I just checked is wrong, I got a date of birth on DJ in 1994. So he's 29, I believe, in July.
Oh, Spotrac is wrong. Good try. Spotrac has him at 29.7. So, yeah, that's all that is. He's 28. He's about to be 29. But, age 30 season next year. So you would still be signing him. Yeah,
they would be signing him going into the age 30 season, which we haven't seen them do. Cheeto, very similar bucket, born in 1995. So he'll be 29 next year. But those are guys that, in the past, the Bengals have not extended. And we've seen it numerous times in the past few years. We've seen them not be involved in free agents at that point. I do wonder, before we talk about DJ Reader in depth, and we will go there, I think, next, or maybe we won't. Maybe we'll talk about this next. Will this philosophy change as they have more money locked in to Jamar, into Joe Burrow, potentially T. Higgins, potentially Logan Wilson, right? As they have more long-term commitments, will they open themselves up the way you see a lot of teams do in championship windows to more of those 1 year, 2 year, short-term veteran ring chaser type deals?
I think it's a good topic, and those are the two things we should hit on: Reader, and then that, because that is at some point. Well, let's get into it. Let's answer that question and discuss Reader as well. We'll do that coming up next. Today's episode of Locked On Bengals is brought to you by FanDuel. And the NBA Finals are here. And whether you're all in on Jimmy Butler and the Heat, maybe you think Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets are going to get it done and win their first championship in team history, well, you have to get to FanDuel right now, because new customers can get a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500. It's the perfect time to take advantage of this offer because, well, FanDuel is America's #1 sports book. And whether you're betting the money line, whether you want to take the over on Jimmy Butler points, the under on the Denver Nuggets, you can tell where my loyalty lies. I'm just kidding. Of course, Nikola Jokic is a beast, back-to-back MVP, and has a chance to become the NBA Finals MVP. So if you want to wager on that, or anything else, NBA Finals, Major League Baseball, you need to get to FanDuel.com/LockedOn. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn and get your no sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA.
DJ Reader or philosophy on 1-year veteran ring chaser deals next, James? Where do we go?
Let's talk about Reader because
Yeah.
is he the best player on their defense?
He's certainly in the conversation. If he's
Who's
not,
ahead of him?
Best player on the defense. You would have to
me,
make
he
it.
is. He is.
Yeah, I think so. Probably like Trey Hendrickson in the conversation, Mike Hilton in the conversation, Healthy Cheeto in the conversation. I think those guys are all in the conversation. But yeah, what DJ Reader was doing last year when he was healthy, which before and after his injury, was all pro level stuff. Like the guy was doing freakish things game in, game out as a nose tackle, which is hard to do. There's only a few guys in the NFL that can do freakish things as nose tackle every week.
And so with that said, picking him number one, it's a balance because he's entering year 4 with the Bengals. And 2 of those years he's dealt with significant injuries. The first year, well, it's okay because they weren't good and they weren't going to be good even with him on the field. And clearly he rebounded in 2021. Last year was able to come back and make a huge impact, like you said, after going down early in the season. So I think it's a dilemma for the Bengals because he doesn't grow on trees. He's very, very hard to find. Someone that makes an impact like that at that spot. And so if anyone made them at least discuss the idea, because everyone talks about Joe Burrow and T. Higgins, duh. But like Logan Wilson, are you sure you need to get a deal done with Logan Wilson, or can that money go towards DJ Reader? Like, that's the part where I think it's interesting is everyone just assumes those 3 because it's the same draft class. Reader is that good, but the health part matters. What kind of deal does he want? Does he want to go out and maybe have I don't know if he'll have an all-pro type year. I know he was playing like it. It's just really tough at defensive tackle. But could he make his first Pro Bowl in a contract year and make a push there? He should have already made Pro Bowls, by the way.
Yeah.
It's silly, but hasn't. I do wonder from that aspect because you're right. He could very well want a raise. And I don't know if the Bengals are going to be in a spot to give him that raise, depending on how he plays this year. And so do they try to get ahead of it? I'm not sure they will. I think they'll make him play it out. And that's it's going to bode for a potential dilemma in 10 months or so, 9 months.
Yeah. And I think like from the team perspective, knowing how they operate, they're probably going to make an argument about his health if they were going to try to extend him, knowing how the team operates. They wouldn't be entirely wrong to do that from a business perspective, from a negotiation perspective. This is how it works in the NFL, but defensive tackles get paid right now. Dexter Lawrence, $22.5 million deal. We just saw Ed Oliver, who has not been as good as DJ Reader, but is much younger, signed a $16 million, $17 million deal. DJ Reader currently making $13 million, which at the time for nose tackle, we thought was a lot.
It was.
And now he's making less than Dalvin Tomlinson is making from the Browns, $14.25 million. Or a number of other players. Kenny Clark, who's really good, not a great example, but plays nose tackle, more disruptive, plays a lot of nose tackle for the Packers, $17.5 million. Vita Vea, the previous preeminent nose tackle in the NFL, $17.75 million. So the number for Reader, I would guess, even for a third contract, even though he's a little bit older, Javon Hargrave at age 30 just signed a $21 million deal, different position, but interior defensive lineman, is probably 16 plus on the low end.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have that in the budget when you have those numbers coming up on offense? I don't know.
Honestly, if you're telling me you're getting younger everywhere else on defense, Miles Murphy is either Hubbard or Hendrickson's long-term replacement. And Hendrickson, well, we'll have to have a conversation about him. He's set to make a lot of money in 2024 and could certainly be on the block if he doesn't play extremely well this season. And I think he knows that, and part of that is the Miles Murphy pick.
Can you where is that coming from? You're not the first person to mention that, and I've never thought of Trey as a cut candidate. Like his contract, yeah, he has a cap hit of $17.5 million, but that's still like ninth most in the NFL next year. And you're not going to get a guy, in my opinion, that is at his level next year. He is the whole Bengals pass rusher. I guess you have to see what Myles Murphy and Joseph Ossai do this year.
Sure.
But the idea of cap cutting Trey Hendrickson next year seems misguided to me.
It depends on what he does and his impact versus these other guys. That's the part of it. I mean,
yeah, if he has a down year, sure, then you can talk.
He had a down year last year.
I think he was still really good last year. He didn't
Doesn't
have
matter.
sacks, but he was still really, really good.
Eight sacks is not eight sacks will not get it done. He better get close to that. He better be in the double digits again. For $18 million.
We need to evolve beyond sacks, James.
That's fine. It sounds cute. That's why no one wanted the Bengals to sign Trey Hendrickson and question the signing too. And the Bengals said, actually, he finishes plays and gets sacks. It shouldn't be crazy to ask him to do that, especially with this defensive line. We've talked about it, about how deep they are. And so hopefully you can keep him fresher because he did deal with injuries late in the season. I'm not saying cut him. I'm saying if he has 6 or 7 sacks this year, even with a bunch of pressures, I think the Bengals would look at that and say, I don't know. Because that might be the difference between keeping Reader and not keeping Reader, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on the context of the overall pass rush production profile, because despite the sack number last year, he was still one of the best pass rushers in the NFL last year.
And I'm not saying he's not good. That's not, but when you're making that type of money, the Bengals are going to want you to produce at a high, and I think he will. But when you have $2.5 million in dead money and you could save a ton of cap space, there's at least a chance, especially with a guy like Myles Murphy behind you. And who knows, maybe Murphy doesn't produce or Hendrickson has a great year. Hopefully he has 22 sacks this year. And then it's just a no-brainer, or it's $1 million per sack. He gets 17. That'd be nice. 17 and a half sacks in 2023. And then it's a no-brainer. So I don't think it's like a thing they've discussed a ton, but I wouldn't rule it out completely, I guess is how I would look at Hendrickson. And part of it is because of this. I don't know, even with a Reader replacement, still in college or wherever, I don't know if you're getting one in free agency, with Reader's replacement not on the roster. I don't know if they bring him back. I don't know if they're going to be able to sign him to a $17 million per year type deal.
Probably more, right? But like, that's what I look at as a floor. But you look at the roster and there's nobody. There's nobody else. Their defensive tackles under contract in the future are BJ Hill and Zach Carter.
Yeah.
They got to do something there. This is the last year for JT Fele, for Josh Tupou, in addition to DJ Reader.
Mm-hmm.
And they have some control over, some college free agents and Dominique Davis, who was a street free agent for them last year. But you're not relying on those guys as starters. Something's going to have to give there. They're going to need to invest some resources at that spot. I think more than most, when you look at this roster, like they might need to invest in right tackle in the future. In a couple of years, they're probably going to need to invest in the interior offensive line again. But for next year, there's nothing really there. You're scraping the cupboards. That's not a phrase.
But that's the argument for it. Is it's like he doesn't grow on trees. We have him. It's kind of the same argument as your Hendrickson one. The impact is there. It costs a lot, but it's worth it. And in an ideal world, you'd be able to extend Reader and have Hendrickson. Maybe you extend Hendrickson if you can and lower that. Well, you might be able to lower that cap hit if you do that and extend him after this year, or extend him this offseason. It would have to be this offseason, right? No, next offseason. I'm getting these contracts confused.
DJ?
That said, no. Trey. You could extend him after this year and massage that money down a little bit if you wanted to. But you might not want to push it because that might impact the Burrow. Who knows, right? But the point is, for them to keep this level, they're going to have to find the line of getting younger at some spots while also keeping quality guys. You can't just go all in on young and expect all of these guys to replace these veterans that you've brought in. At the same time, you can't keep all of them and just hang on to this window with all of the old guys. Some of them are going to go. So they just need to, much like they did in free agency over the past few years, they need to pick the right guys to keep and the right ones to let walk. And I think that's a fine line.
Yeah, at some point when your QB spending money increases, something has to give elsewhere. Somehow, something has to give elsewhere. The Bengals currently, it's not nothing. They're about in the middle of the pack for QB spending because Joe Burrow was a first overall pick, and that's not all that cheap, despite what Bean, the Bills GM, would like
Brandon
you to believe.
Bean.
Yeah, but despite what Brandon Bean would like you to believe, the Bengals cap commitments to Joe Burrow currently and in the last couple of years have not been extremely high compared to Josh Allen. But that is also part of the conversation is Joe Burrow's contract structure. How does that fit into this whole thing? Because depending on when that cap hit jumps up for Joe Burrow, which I believe is just now happening. No, it's not even happened yet. The cap hit for Josh Allen goes from $20 million to $47 million for the Bills from this year to next year.
Mm-hmm.
So he signed that extension, 2 years ago, right? They still had 2 more years of that cap hit being pretty reasonable. So Burrow's cap hit, depending on the way the Bengals do the deal, which is why we're so interested in the structure, might not actually really hold the Bengals back and hurt them very much right away. They might have a little bit of time before that cap hit really goes crazy. And that might give them a couple more years for some of these veterans. But that's kind of where you would have liked to have seen, if that was a plan, some of these extensions getting done, if that was a plan. And it's hard to make that the plan for aging defensive linemen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a balance. Let's dive into your other question, which is championship window, veterans looking for a ring, potential discounts. And I think it's a good question, and it's something the Bengals are going to have to be open to. So let's discuss that coming up next.
That is a question that we thought the Bengals might get into this year. Remember, go back to our free agency preview. We talked about the possibilities of maybe this is a year they start doing those 1-year ring chaser deals for some of those veterans that have a little bit left in the tank and want to try to win on a team that's clearly in a Super Bowl contending window before they retire, before they're done playing football. Didn't really see that. Saw some players want to come play for the Bengals and probably more approach the Bengals than we heard about, from our conversations with various folks in the Bengals employ in their front office. But they didn't go that route. They signed a mercenary tight end or two. And outside of that, their big free agents were extending Jermaine Pratt and Orlando Brown, multi-year deals.
Yeah.
So we're not seeing it yet. But it has to be the further we go into this thing, I keep expecting them to pivot to this idea where they need a guy for a year at a spot for a year. Maybe this next year on the defensive interior, right? Maybe this is where we see it for the first time. Who knows?
Maybe. I think on offense, it's interesting because, it's easy to say Charlie Jones, but what if you need a slot receiver next year and Boyd just gets the bag thrown at him? Could certainly go that route. I think receivers, tight ends, skill players, running backs. I'm just looking at the 2024 free agent class. Like Hunter Henry, it's an interesting one. If that ended up happening, right, where you could get. Isn't
he still going to get paid? Isn't he? How old is Hunter Henry now?
I don't know. 30. He'll 29. He'll be 29 then. But I don't know, right? Do you get that? I mean, he got paid in New England. At some point, you're going to want to win. But guys like that, I think offense. I think a lot of those guys, they're going to be attracted to Cincinnati. Now, defensively, if Lou stays, which would be such a nice thing, right? You have this proven track record of veterans coming in and him finding the best spot for them. And I think that's the other part. It's not just winning. These free agents that have come here have had success. And unless you're, some not in on football guy that clearly didn't like football, like Trey Waynes, it works. And I know he dealt with injuries too, but he was just not all in on the idea of playing for the Bengals. And I think it was a struggle from the get-go. But Yeah, there are a lot of guys. I don't know. I don't think they'll need a guard, but Kevin Zeitler would be a free agent again.
Doing that again. God.
I know, but I'm just saying, like guys like that might not have a ring that could be.
I say that ring. Because I don't want to see the Bengals make that mistake again. If he's still playing well, which, I mean, the guy's been playing well his entire career.
Yeah. So I think at some point they will need to pivot and not just third contract guys. And they're going to have to keep some of these guys. Maybe it is Hendrickson. Maybe they say no to Reeder and they say it's harder to find the edge rusher. We're going to pay Hendrickson. But I actually think of the two, which one ages better? Might be Reeder, might be the interior guy. And so I do wonder.
That is a take.
There. But is it?
Yeah. Just based on the history of the positions, you see the interior guys tend to fall off a cliff, I think, a little bit harder and without warning more than the edge guys.
I just think the way he wins, right? He's not going to wake up and not be strong and be able to move a house with his body. Like he just does that.
You see that though. That's the thing that happens.
And maybe it will with Breeder. I just don't. I don't. But anyways, the point is they'll have to supplement that with some of these other veterans. They're going to have to, because when you're playing for championships, you can only rely on so many young guys, so many guys that even if they played in huge games in college, it still takes a little time. Most of the time. Jamar Chases don't grow on trees where they're streaking downfield after a rookie record type season in his first year in the NFL with a chance to win a Super Bowl. That doesn't happen. Most receivers don't even get on the field as rookies. Like we saw it last year in the rookie class. Like it is not the same in that Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase won 2 back-to-back years, and T. Higgins to a certain degree too. I think that kind of clouded things a bit. So rookies, it's hard for rookies to get on the field and make a huge impact on a contending team. So hopefully they can attract the right veterans as well and be open to signing them, because yeah, I think that's how they're going to remain in this championship window and extend it.
And who knows, maybe we still see that this year. There's still time left. There's still veterans out there. Maybe you see somebody take a 1-year deal.
Uh-oh. Name one. Oh,
I mean,
go ahead.
The guys that I'm thinking of are going to get bigger deals but like Sue would be the one that would be the cheaper end of this if he wants to play again.
He's fun. Gronk.
Yeah.
I'm just really trying to bother people.
Gronk, who's like doubled down, tripled down on he's not playing again in the last month or so. But Gronk. Like the bigger names are like the Dalton Risners, who are probably still looking for multi-year deals somewhere. There's one other guy whose name I'm now forgetting, who's still out there, and I can't remember it now. Anyway, it'll be interesting to see as camp goes on.
Julio Jones.
No, I don't think
Sammy
so.
Watkins, N'Keal Harry, Jarvis Landry.
Those guys are all free agents?
Yeah.
I guess
Kenny
I'm not
Galladay.
too surprised.
DeAndre Hopkins. Yeah, I'm not surprised by any of them, really. Jake Kumaro.
Oh, now there's a name that's going to end up playing with Aaron Rodgers in New York City.
Stanley Berryhill. Bet you never heard of him.
That's going to do it for this episode of
Willie
the Locked On
Johnson.
Bengals podcast.
Is that a real person?
On Tuesday after the open OTA period to get your
Marcus
practice
Johnson.
updates, while James continues to name wide receivers you haven't heard of. Until then, thanks for listening.
Andre Roberts is 35. Wow.
To this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Hoo day, and have a good one.